I think so. It had already, it said it, I guess it had already started, but it hadn't gone live. So all I hit was go live and, well, check and see. Okay, what was going on last week?
Jesus began his ministry.
Okay, tell me about that. How did he begin? What did he do?
And there was a man with an unclean spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't review this week.
And Jesus said, "Hi, nice to meet you." No, what happened?
He rebuked the demon from the man.
Right. So he's in the synagogue. Do you remember that? He goes into the synagogue to teach. And everybody's amazed because he's teaching with authority that's very different from what they're used to. And then this spirit, this unclean spirit, recognizes him. Do you remember what the spirit called him?
The Son of God.
Yeah, the Holy One. I mean, he Jesus of Nazareth. Like, he knows that there's the irony already right at the beginning, that the people don't know who Jesus is, but the unclean spirits totally know who he is, and they know it's dangerous that he just walked into this synagogue. So Jesus rebukes the spirit, and that's it. No prayer, no big battle. It's just Jesus says the word and it's done. Okay, then what?
He goes to the house of Simon Peter,
Mm-hmm.
and there's his wife is sick in bed with a serious illness. They asked Jesus to help.
And how does it go?
Well.
It goes well.
Yeah.
Jesus does the same thing with the sickness that he did with the evil spirit. He rebukes it and it leaves. Which I don't think means that necessarily that the sickness was caused by an evil spirit. It could have been, but I think the point is that it's the same authority. He's using the same authority to drive out diseases that he uses to drive out evil spirits, which is the same authority that he's teaching with. So then the end of the Sabbath comes and everything goes crazy because now everybody's bringing the sick and the possessed to Jesus, and he's touching all these people. He's healing all of them. Okay, then what?
Then he goes to Capernaum.
Mm-hmm. Remember, the people want him to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
They want him to stay and like do miracles for them, and he won't. Do you remember what he says?
And let's preach the good news of the kingdom.
Mm-hmm. That's his job. That's the mission that Jesus is on, is to proclaim the kingdom of God. And he's not going to get waylaid by the popularity that comes with people getting these miracles and healings and then saying, well, Jesus, why don't you just camp out here? Just stay with us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people would like, but Jesus won't do that because that's not his ultimate mission. Okay, so then what?
He goes to the shore of Lake Gennesaret.
Which is the Sea of Galilee. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And the people crowd around, and
Yep.
Simon tells him to get on a boat. Or
He commandeers Simon's boat.
it.
That's right.
And he goes out on the boat, and the crowd's over here, and he's
Yep.
teaching.
Yes. And when he's done teaching, then what?
Then he tells to go fishing. In the middle of the day.
In the middle of the day, which was not when they normally went. How did Simon respond to that?
Simon says that they're tired because they've been out there all night.
And it's kind of like, well, we didn't catch anything.
We didn't catch anything, so we'll go ahead and try.
And again, I really wish I could hear his tone of voice.
I know.
He's like, yeah, we've been
I
there,
don't
done
wanna
that.
do
I don't
this
know.
again.
But he does it.
Failed already, I don't want to do it
my
again.
net.
Yeah.
I just rolled them up.
It's like working the night shift and then after this.
Yeah, to work the other shift.
Uh-huh.
Can you stay a little longer?
Yeah, that's right. So he does it because you remember what he said, but because you're the one who's asking, so he does it. And what happens?
They fill up their nets and other nets, they bring in another boat and fill up their nets.
The boat starts to
The
sink.
boat starts to
Like
sink.
it's huge,
nets
the haul
break.
that they
It's
bring in.
just, yeah.
So clearly not because they're good fishermen, but because Jesus intervened right there. And how does Simon respond to that?
He says, go away from me, Lord, because I'm a sinful man.
So he recognizes something in Jesus right there that causes him to respond not with amazement, which is what we've been seeing so far, but with humility toward Jesus. And Jesus doesn't send him away. What does Jesus say instead?
Come and
Yeah,
follow me.
don't be afraid. Come and follow me. In fact, he says, I'm going to make you fishers of men. You're going to join up That's right, the song, that's right. I was singing it later that week, and I was like,
And the significance or the important thing about that was that he called him Lord, and Lord is better than just the master.
yes, it's a heavier word,
It's a heavier word
definitely.
than just the master.
yes. So I don't know that Simon realizes who Jesus is, but he's definitely realizing there's more going on here than just a prophet with some power to heal. There's something serious happening. And so when Jesus calls him, when he calls Peter, and not just Peter, but James and John too, who were fishing with them, they just leave everything, including that miraculous catch of fish. They just get up and leave, and they follow Jesus.
Can you see the people from up there swarming down to get those fish? I mean, that must have been pretty,
Yep,
Free food.
that's right.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
tons of it.
And we just sort of mentioned in passing last week how we've now seen all three of the temptations that Satan leveled at Jesus. We've seen all that come back around now, where Jesus trusted the Father for his time, and the Father is faithful to the Son, and he didn't have to he didn't have to prove himself, which he didn't with Satan. He didn't have to, and now the evidence is coming fast and furious that Jesus really is the Son of God, and all these things that are happening clarify his identity for anybody who's watching. Remember too how Isaiah 61 gives us the lens through which to interpret Jesus' ministry, which is that he's come to proclaim good news to the poor, sight for the blind, release for the prisoners, freedom for the oppressed, the year of the Lord's favor, which is the year of Jubilee. So already we're seeing Jesus bring release from captivity. And that is going to continue today. The miracles that we're going to see today, that whole picture of Jesus as the year of Jubilee in a person, bringing redemption to people and freedom and provision, that's going to continue in the miracles that we look at today too. Okay, anything else you want to add from last week?
I was actually thinking of my short-term mission trips in Brazil and how they're burdened by a lot of evil spirits, and I have a headache, so you must have an evil spirit.
Right.
And that would be terrible.
Yes.
And they have a lot of witch doctors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in East Africa, I remember having a friend say to me, when you live with that, you live with a lot of fear.
Yeah.
There's just fear all the time. Imagine if you live in fear of those kinds of spirits because nobody's powerful enough to stand against them, and suddenly Jesus shows up. And how much power does he have? I mean, again, it's just not even a battle when Jesus faces off against those spirits. Well, what we're going to see a bit later is that when he frees the demoniac who's on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, the people who see that are more afraid of Jesus than they were of the spirit when it's all over, because they realize how much power he has. Okay, so let's look at chapter 5, verses 12 to 32. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. One day as he was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law, who had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem, were sitting there, and the power of the Lord was present for him to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralytic on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd right in front of Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, "Why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say your sins are forgiven or to say, 'Get up and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He said to the paralyzed man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." Immediately he stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, "We have seen remarkable things today." After this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. "Follow me," Jesus said to him, and Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Okay, so how does this section begin in verse 12?
With the leper,
Yes.
and he did just have a little bit.
No, he was
He was
covered.
He's got a spreading skin disease, right?
Mhm.
And this is, well, we're going to look at the background for this in just a minute. But it's interesting that as Jesus is just traveling around through these towns, this man comes along who has a skin disease. That term translated leprosy, both in Hebrew and in Greek. It has a broader range of meaning than just leprosy. It's a word that covers all kinds of infectious skin diseases. And when he sees Jesus, what does he do? Yeah, what does he say?
Asked if he was willing to heal him.
Yes, and how does he put it right here?
Lord, if
He
you
says,
are willing,
"Lord, if you are willing, you can do what?
make me clean."
Make me clean." Okay, now that's important that he says that. We're going to come back to that in just a second. Before we get to that, we're going to look at the background of this in Leviticus 13. So I'm just going to read Leviticus. Well, there's a whole long text of it in Leviticus that lays out all this stuff about spreading skin diseases. But the punchline is in Leviticus 13, verses 45 and 46, which says, "The person with an infectious skin disease must wear torn clothes, let his hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of his face, and cry out, 'Unclean, unclean.' As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone, and he must live outside the camp." Okay, now, that's important, that under the Mosaic law, anybody with a spreading skin disease was ritually unclean, and they had to separate themselves from the community and stay away from populated places. They couldn't participate in communal activities, they couldn't go to feasts, they couldn't go to the tabernacle or the temple. They were restricted even in just the normal day-to-day things where they'd come in physical contact with other people. So obviously that would affect a person's whole life. I mean, your home, your work, everything. I mean, you're excommunicated basically from the whole community and kept outside. And because anyone who came in contact with that person or anything they touched would also become unclean, the law regarding separation was taken very seriously. It's not just that you have to stay separate, it's that if you come anywhere near somebody else, you have to make it clear you have a spreading skin disease by what you say and by how you look, so that other people can, take a wide, angle around, so you don't come in contact with other people. So with that in mind, think about this encounter between the man and Jesus. So first of all, the fact that he would actually approach Jesus is a breach of the law. But he risks it. Why? Because he already knows enough about Jesus to be convinced that Jesus can heal him. And you notice that in his understanding, it's not a matter of Jesus' power. It's a matter of his willingness. This guy already knows Jesus can do it. The question is whether he will or not. And when he says that, can you make me clean? That's significant because, of course, being healed and being made clean essentially are the same thing. But the fact that he focuses on the cleanness, I think, makes it clear that it's the ritual purity that's uppermost in his thoughts. This spreading skin disease, it might be painful, it might cause, other kinds of difficulties, we don't know. But I think what's mainly on his mind is the fact that this ritual uncleanness keeps him separate from everything else. That's what would affect your whole life, is he doesn't just want to be okay, he wants to be brought back into the community. And Jesus is the one who can do that. And that uncleanness, that point of ritual impurity matters because it points to another aspect of who Jesus is. Well, let's keep going. So what does Jesus do in 13?
Touches him.
Reaches out, touches him, then what?
I am willing.
Yep.
Be
And then-
clean.
That's right. Now, The only thing more scandalous than the leper approaching Jesus is how Jesus responds. Could he have just healed this man by saying the word?
Mhm.
Of course he could have. So why do you think he makes a point of touching him in order to heal him?
But you weren't supposed to touch him.
Because it's against the law. Now that's interesting. Why would he do it when it's against the law?
Because the law is no longer important. Because he is the law. He is the fulfillment of the law.
That's right. The law has set the stage to reveal something about who Jesus is when he touches this man. So, I mean, the first thing you notice, of course, when he touches him is there's some compassion in Jesus, isn't there? That he's touching somebody who probably nobody had touched for a very long time. And Jesus does that all the time when he heals. He's just not at all bothered about the fact that people are sick and maybe I'm going to get sick too. No, it just doesn't matter. He touches all kinds of people that other people won't touch. So there's some compassion here in touching him. But the other thing that's really important is that when he touches him, it demonstrates something about his authority. Well, what happens when he touches the man and says, be clean? Boom, right there. He just becomes clean. Now, that demonstrates something about who Jesus is because there's no precedent for that in the Old Testament. So all over the Old Testament law, if somebody who's clean comes in contact with someone who's unclean, the person who's clean becomes unclean. It never happens the other way around. That the person who's clean gives their cleanness to the unclean person. Never. Always goes the other direction. So all of a sudden you're getting Jesus reversing everything that's there in the law. That when he touches someone who's unclean, instead of him becoming unclean, that guy becomes clean. Why does that matter? What does it tell you about who Jesus is?
He's all powerful.
Mm-hmm.
He's reversing the curse, the sin.
Mm-hmm.
Incorruptible.
Yeah. Because when the ritual purity comes up against Jesus, it can't do anything to him. Now, who does he have to be for the ritual impurity to have no effect on him at all? He has to be God because he has to be permanently holy. The only person who's clean enough to be completely unaffected by ritual impurity is somebody who's permanently holy. And that's who Jesus is. So when he stands there and touches this man, he is incorruptible. And we know what's coming next. He's not just ritually incorruptible, he's morally incorruptible as well. There's nothing that can come against Jesus that will make him defiled or profane. And so you see his holiness right here on display because of the background of the law. It's like all of a sudden the ritual law has to give way because it encounters somebody who doesn't fit the categories of Sinai. And that someone is the lawgiver himself. I think this is one of the purposes of Leviticus, is to set the stage for this. So that when Jesus touches that man and he doesn't become unclean, everybody who knows the law should be standing there saying, hang on a minute, what just happened right there? All of the Jews who know Leviticus ought to be stopped in their tracks and thinking, who's that guy? That the ritual purity went the other way. That never happens, but that's exactly what happens with Jesus. When they see the unalterable holiness of Jesus displayed against the background of their own law, they should have a million questions running through their heads right now about who Jesus is. Not just that he's powerful, which he is, but that he's holy and he's permanently holy. And then, well, what does Jesus tell the man?
Go to the priest and, well, don't tell anybody what happened, and then go to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them.
That's right. So the law can't make somebody clean. It can only pronounce them clean or unclean. But those sacrifices are important. It's a pretty long and involved process that's described in Leviticus 14 about how somebody with a spreading skin disease is declared clean and then brought back into the community. But those sacrifices provide public testimony that the man is well and that he's to be welcomed back now among the covenant people of God. So Jesus, he's not looking for publicity in all this. In fact, the publicity makes it harder for him to do what he wants to do. He just wants the man to go get it sorted so he can be brought back. I mean, if he's clean, now he can come back and live with his family. He can come back and be welcomed in the community. But how does that whole episode end in 15 and 16?
The news had spread and Jesus was overwhelmed with people who wanted to be healed.
That's right. And it doesn't say that the man did it right here, but Mark tells us that the man blabbed. Well,
man
it would be hard not to, wouldn't
Not
it?
to
Like,
blab.
even if, as you're on the way to the temple, you'd just be like, hey, you want to know what just happened? Let me tell you what just happened. Like, let me tell you what that guy just did. I mean,
And the communities weren't that big, I mean,
No.
so that everybody had known that that man
He was
had leprosy.
yeah, news gets around pretty fast because he's telling everybody.
All you have to do is,
Yes. Yeah, you know, he's going around saying, I'm not supposed to tell you. But.
yeah. Don't say anything to anybody.
And then they're like, and don't tell anybody I told you what this
Yeah.
guy told me. So all the crowds are coming now to be healed, and how does Jesus respond? What does he do? I mean, he's healing them, but what else does he do?
He withdrew to lonely places and prayed.
Which we saw before. We saw that in the previous bit, because I think right here you see Jesus keeping his focus not on the crowds and the popularity that comes with these miracles, but on the agenda of his Father. I think there's probably a very real temptation for Jesus to take advantage of all that praise and popularity and just do his own thing. I mean, isn't it, in a certain sense, it's the temptation from Satan, but now packaged in a different way, where how easy would it be to just go the way the crowds want him to go and skip the cross? You know, just go the way of the miracle worker, where everybody's happy and everybody loves you, and don't follow the way of the suffering, which is actually the way that the Father has laid out. But you see Jesus constantly coming back, communing with his Father, and then carrying on with the mission that he's been given.
My footnote said strength comes from God,
Yeah.
and we can only be strengthened by spending time with him.
And if Jesus does that,
And
what does that
Jesus
mean for
needed
us?
strength, I mean, he didn't I guess he had inexhaustible strength.
And yet, he's taken on humanity,
Mhm.
so he's taken on weakness with that.
Right.
And that the relationship with his Father is what gives him strength. Yeah. Okay, now, how does the next scene open in verse 17?
The Pharisees and scribes are watching, sitting around.
They'd come from every village.
Yeah, from how far away?
Judea, Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Now that's important because that means Jesus is getting he's getting the attention of the religious bigwigs now. If the religious leaders are showing up all the way from Jerusalem, he's on their radar now. Now up until now, Jesus hasn't encountered a lot of opposition. Well, apart from that little dust up at Nazareth where they're going to throw him off the cliff, I guess that's opposition. But it's about to change because what we're going to see right here, this is the first of 5 scenes now in a row that are going to show Jesus encountering opposition from the Jewish religious leaders. So he's teaching, we know from the context he's in somebody's house while he's teaching, and all these Pharisees and teachers of the law are sitting there listening, coming from all over the place. And then Luke adds something interesting because he says the power of the Lord is with Jesus to heal the sick. Now, if Jesus is divine, doesn't he always have the power to heal?
Mhm.
Yes. But what we're seeing again is the voluntary dependence of the Son on both the Father and the Spirit. It's not that Jesus sometimes has the power to heal and sometimes doesn't. It's that he doesn't do anything on his own. He's always together with the Father and the Spirit in this ministry that he's doing. He's following the plan and the wisdom of the Father, and he's depending on the empowerment of the Spirit. Because it's, salvation in all its forms is a group project. It sounded like a party there for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go join up with it. Okay. So, what happens then in verses 18 and 19?
That's when they brought the paralytic man to him and they dug through the roof.
That's right. So Jesus is teaching, these men show up with this paralyzed man on a mat. They're trying to get in, but they can't because there's too many people. So what to do? Well, go up on the flat roof of this house. If you've ever seen a picture of those houses, there were usually stairs on the outside. So, I used to wonder when I was a kid, I used to think, how in the world did they get this paralyzed guy up on the roof? Well, there's stairs and then a flat roof. They make a hole in the roof and they lower the man on his mat through the crowd right in front of Jesus. Can you just imagine the drama? Like, here's Jesus teaching in the middle of all these people, and then, I don't know, they must have started to hear some ruckus. And then, and then the dirt starts to fall. And then the roof opens up. What's your impression of those men, those friends of that paralyzed man?
They're good friends.
They are good friends, aren't they? It's not the point of the whole, of this whole episode, but it is just amazing to see these guys who realize their friend needs Jesus, and they are going to do whatever it takes to get him to Jesus. Like they're not going to be dissuaded by the crowds. And every time I read this, I think, don't you need friends like that?
Yeah.
You need friends who will get you to Jesus when you can't get there yourself. And sometimes you have to be that friend to other people. You have to be the one who says to somebody else, you know what? Jesus. That's where we need to go. So these guys, they're great, just that they will not be put off by all of these people standing in the way. That they're convinced Jesus can do something to help, even for paralysis, and they're going to get this guy to help.
I mean, as a mother, every time I read this story, and she always notices one of the friends has his little old round mouth and he's just hanging on So it's not just getting in there, it's holding in there.
Yeah, that's right. And destroying somebody's house to do it. I mean, I always think, do they come back later and say, we'll fix that, or I don't know.
Sorry about that, but now he can walk.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Small price to pay, that's right. So, this hole opens up, the mat with the paralyzed guy comes down through the roof. I mean, there's some serious drama. What will Jesus do? So how does he react in verse 20?
He told the man his sins were forgiven.
Do you think that's what they were expecting? Do you think that's what they wanted?
No, they wanted the healing.
I think so too. It almost, when I read this, it almost seems kind of anticlimactic or irrelevant, like Jesus just changed the subject. Like, I wonder if everybody in that room felt a little let down right there, because what they wanted was the miracle. They wanted to see Jesus do something spectacular. I think I would have been disappointed, and I bet a lot of those people were too. Because we're typically more interested in miracles than in forgiveness, and Jesus knows it. So why does Jesus start with that? Well, here's the thing. What's the man's biggest problem?
Can't walk.
It's his sin.
I see. Okay.
On the surface, it's his paralyzed condition, right? Because you would look at him on the outside and you think it doesn't get any worse than being paralyzed. And yet Jesus just bypasses all that and goes straight to the real problem, which is the spiritual paralysis, not the physical paralysis. It's his sin. That's the problem. Now, whether his paralysis is a result of his sin doesn't get mentioned, I think, because it's completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's that forgiveness is the main healing that he needs if his biggest problem is sin. And if you're spiritually paralyzed, I mean, who can break you out of that kind of bondage? Verse 21 then, well, what happens in 21?
You want to know who this man is who is speaking blasphemy?
Who does? Who wants to know?
The Pharisees.
Yeah,
and the
those religious
teachers.
leaders, they're sitting there, and did you notice they didn't say anything? They're thinking it.
They're thinking, yeah.
They're thinking to themselves, who does that guy think he is? You know? That's right. So he's speaking blasphemy, they think, because who has the authority to forgive sins except God? Who can forgive someone's sins except the one who's been sinned against? You can't forgive your neighbor for their offense against somebody else. So the assumption in what Jesus is saying is that the man's sins are against him, and he's the one who has the right to forgive them. But that would mean Jesus is putting himself in the place of God.
They still did all the sacrifices, right? I mean, we just,
Yep.
okay, that we studied and we did it all.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And the thing of it is, their reaction is right, isn't it? There is nobody who has the authority or the ability to forgive forgive except God alone. If Jesus isn't God, which is their assumption, then what he's saying absolutely is blasphemy. But if he is God, well, how's he going to make that known to the people? How's he going to make it clear that he has that kind of authority? Well, how does he respond in 22 to 24?
Yeah, good question. Which is easier, your sins are forgiven, or to say get up and walk?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He also turns out that he knew what they were thinking.
Yeah, they read their minds.
Why do you think he said that in verse 22? I mean, he actually says, why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Doesn't that question by Jesus already tell them that he's not who they think he is? How does he even know what they're thinking in their hearts unless he's God? I mean, every time I read that, I wonder, did those religious leaders suddenly go, hang on a minute, we didn't say anything out loud. How did he know that?
And then Jesus made it so easy. He said it, it happened.
Yeah.
And then they had this big complicated Levitical thing, with the fire.
Because they don't know who he is. That's the thing. They don't know who he is. And he knows their thoughts and the faithless condition of their hearts precisely because he is God. By the way, this was part of the prophecy of Simeon. I don't know if you remember this back from chapter 2, when Simeon said to Mary, this child is going to be the cause of the rising and falling of many in Israel, and he's going to expose the thoughts and hearts of people. That's already happening right here. He's exposing the hearts of the religious leaders, who everybody would look at on the surface and assume these are the people who are devoted and pious, but Jesus is already bringing to the surface the fact that they don't believe him. They don't know who he is. He's going to make it clear who he is, and they're still not going to submit to him. So he confronts their unbelief by challenging them with this little riddle, which is easier, to say your sins are forgiven or to say get up and walk. Now, for the average person, it might seem easier to say your sins are forgiven because forgiveness is abstract, and it's something that you can't see or prove. But if Jesus is actually God, then he's not just saying the man's sins are forgiven, he's actually doing it. When he says it, he's actually accomplishing something. And that's far weightier than healing somebody's body. But now here's the thing. How could he demonstrate to the people that he has the authority to do something they can't see? How can he demonstrate that he has authority over spiritual things? Well, the way he can do it is by using that same authority to do the physical, which they can see. And that's what he's about to do. The divine authority that's required to forgive the man's sins is the same divine authority that could actually heal his body. And if Jesus has that, if he has the authority that can cause this man to get up and walk, that's what will make it clear that he also has the authority to forgive the man's sins. So he turns to the paralytic, and what does he say?
Take your mat and go home.
He didn't
Get up.
pray,
Get up.
right? Didn't pray, because he doesn't need to. Jesus doesn't have to call on a higher power because he is the higher power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't have to ask God to do something. He is God. So he just says to the man, get up and walk. And he does. Okay, now if there was drama with the guy coming through the roof, you can imagine how much drama there is right here.
Yeah.
When this man gets up and he collects his mat, which tells you he's not a little bit healed. He's completely
His
healed.
muscles and everything.
Everything. He can get up and walk out in front of everybody carrying the mat he came in on. And he goes home praising God. You notice that Jesus heals the man's body the same way he heals his heart, which is with the word. That's all it takes from Jesus. He can forgive his sins, and he can free him from his paralysis, and all he has to do is say it. So he breaks the man's paralysis on both levels. And how do the people react?
And we're amazed.
Yes, and they're praising God. They're filled with awe at the remarkable things that they're seeing. Now, of course, the question is, are they thinking out the implications of what Jesus is saying and doing? Because the logical conclusion of what they've just seen is that he does have the authority to forgive sins, and that means he has to be God. Now, you see, over and over, we see with Jesus, he's not saying to people, I'm God. We talked about this last week, because if he did that, what would happen? They'd stone him for blasphemy. And yet everything Jesus is doing and saying shows them and tells them over and over and over, he is actually God. He's permanently holy, that means he's God. He's got authority over the law, that means he's God. He can forgive people's sins, that means he's God. He can cast out the evil spirits and heal people's diseases with a word, all because of who he is and the authority that he has. Now, did you notice how Jesus referred to himself in verse 24? The Son of Man.
Son of Man.
You know why that matters? That title right there. It is from a prophecy. So it's Son of Man, of course, makes you think of him as a human being, and that's true. But there's this human being who's portrayed in a prophecy in Daniel chapter 7. And that prophecy is really important. So I'm just going to read for you from this vision that Daniel sees, just a couple of verses. So this is Daniel 7, verses 13 and 14. Daniel says, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed." I think about that vision where Daniel sees the Ancient of Days, who is God. And then there's someone who is in the appearance of a man who approaches God and is given all authority, all power, all dominion, and everybody worships him. Who's that? Jesus. It's Jesus. And here's Jesus now in Luke claiming that title. Now, he might not look as glorious as that, yes. But is he not using that authority from Daniel 7 to do the things that he's doing as he's healing people and freeing them from their bondage and forgiving their sins? So the fact that he uses that title for himself, it's not just a way of saying that he's human. It's a way of claiming for himself that role that's envisioned in Daniel chapter 7, which is somebody who has all power and authority. It's like Jesus, I heard this pastor say about this passage, it's like Jesus is hanging out a shingle that says God is among you. He really is making that clear in everything he says and does, that he is divine. Now, think again about all of this in relation to Isaiah 61 in the year of the Lord's favor. Because right now, we're seeing a new and profound aspect of freedom and release. We're not just seeing external release, now we're seeing internal release. Up to this point, we have seen people get freed of diseases, evil spirits, ritual impurity, but this is the first time we actually see somebody get freed from sin, from the kind of bondage that can only be broken through forgiveness. Now we're seeing Jesus deal with people's spiritual impurities and their spiritual bondage too. If you look at just the episode of the cleansing of the leper, the logical question would be, if Jesus can heal people of physical impurity, can he heal them of spiritual impurity too? And right here we get the answer, because in this episode with the paralytic, he does both. Okay, now, all that's important because it sets up the scene that comes next. So, how does the next scene open in 27 and 28?
He sees someone, a tax collector, and says, "Follow me."
Mm-hmm.
And he does.
And he does. Now, that background of Jesus cleansing people of ritual and spiritual impurity, it's continuing right here. Because when he leaves the house and he sees this tax collector, whose name is Levi, by the way, that's another name from Matthew. Matthew and Levi are the same person. Here's Levi sitting at his tax booth on the road. Now, let's talk about some cultural context. We talked about this a bit with John the Baptist. But what do you know about tax collectors?
Maybe they're not
They are not well
Mostly
liked.
love.
Nobody likes them. And it's not just that they're IRS agents, which is bad enough.
Yeah.
But it's that they're working for a foreign government, an occupying government who the Jews consider the enemy. They're collecting taxes for this enemy government, and the government allows them to collect more than their due and to put it in their pocket, right? So they're thieves and they're traitors, and everybody hates them. So for a Jew, one of the things I read said, these kinds of officials were detested everywhere, these tax officials, and they were classed with the vilest of people. When a Jew became a tax collector, he was regarded as an outcast from society. Just like the leper. That's interesting. He was disqualified as a judge or a witness in court. He was excommunicated from the synagogue, and in the eyes of the community, he was a disgrace to his entire family.
Wow. Wow.
It was bad, right? I mean, here he is a social leper, basically. That's who this guy is. And Jesus calls him to get up and follow him. We know actually from Mark's account that Levi was situated in Capernaum, which means that the fishermen probably knew him. You can just imagine how popular this decision was by Jesus when he stops and calls the tax collector to join up with the fishermen. I can imagine they're all like, really? This guy, But that's what Jesus does. And it's interesting, Jesus doesn't ignore him. He doesn't pass by him on the other side of the street. He doesn't stop and lecture him about the evils of his vocation either. He just says, follow me, and Levi does it. Just leaves everything, just like the fisherman did. Levi leaves everything, and he follows Jesus. And then what happens in verse 29?
He celebrates Jesus.
He throws a big party, right? You're a tax collector who just decided to become a disciple of Jesus. You throw a big party. So he has this big banquet at his house. Now, if you're a tax collector and you're an outcast from society, who are you going to invite to your big party? That's right. All the other people who are just like you, right? So, of course, at this banquet, it's tax collectors and sinners. It's all the other people who are social lepers. That's who's at this party. And the fact that it's interesting right here, that Jesus is actually sitting down and eating with them. Why does it matter that Jesus is not just teaching them, but he's actually eating with them? If you're rubbing shoulders with people like that, you're becoming ritually impure, right?
Right.
So why does it matter that Jesus chooses to do that? Mm-hmm.
Jesus doesn't take on the sin. Jesus gives back cleanliness.
That's right. In the same way that he touched the leper, he's now sitting there fellowshipping with the social outcasts. He's sitting there rubbing shoulders with them and eating with them, touching them. And the focus, I mean, they are ritually impure because of the jobs that they have. But the focus here is not on their ritual impurity, it's on their spiritual impurity. But Jesus is still uncontaminatable. He's not corrupted by their sin any more than he is by ritual impurity. And how does Jesus fix it? Does he stand off at a distance and say, be clean? No. He comes near to them and he joins them. He sits down and fellowships with them because it's actually relationship with Jesus that cleanses you. It's not him keeping a distance. It's him coming near. And that's what he does with all of these tax collectors and sinners. And one of the writers I read said, banquets hosted by Jesus have very diverse guest lists and unusual outcomes. And that's true because this is a dinner party that's made up of spiritual lepers where Jesus, as the central figure, he's the one who offers forgiveness of sin as the basis for their acceptance, which I think is a little foreshadow of the messianic banquet to come when we are going to be among the guests, right? I mean, isn't this just giving us a little foretaste of what's coming for us? That there's going to be a banquet laid out for us by God, and we're going to be welcomed at his table. We are the spiritual lepers who get welcomed to his banquet because of what Jesus does.
Can I get that quote again? Diverse guests.
Banquets, it's actually in the supplement.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I put it in there. Yeah. Okay, now, how do the Pharisees and the teachers of the law respond? You get the impression they're like following him around now, like stalking him a little bit.
Almost like, interested, but
Yeah. How do they respond to this banquet?
Why do you eat and drink with these tax collectors and sinners?
Or do you think they're asking because they're waiting for an explanation?
No.
It's a rhetorical question, right?
Yeah.
It's like, stop doing that, right?
Yeah.
They're criticizing him for sitting
Yeah.
there with people that they would never sit with. Now, why? Why are they reacting that way? Why would they never sit with these people?
It's what you expressed, though, he has offended everything.
Mm-hmm.
He has no regard for their thoughts, their laws, their hypocrisy.
That's right. The Pharisees and the scribes, because they are devoted to the ritual law, they govern their lives very strictly by those traditions that have come up around the ritual law. So they're criticizing Jesus because he's not observing the distinction between the righteous and the sinners, which is actually an essential component of their piety. One of the ways that they look pious and righteous is by keeping their distance from people like this. And as a teacher of the law, if that's who Jesus is, he should have recognized it's completely inappropriate for him to be sitting at a table with these kinds of people. In their banquets, the Pharisees generally attempted to maintain a fellowship where there would be no ritual impurity. They didn't want contact with people who would make them ritually impure. Now, how does Jesus respond to that criticism?
It's not the healthy who need a doctor.
Mm-hmm. But who?
I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance.
Right. It's the sick who need a doctor.
It's the sick, yeah.
Now think about that in relation to what we saw with the leper. If Jesus has the power to give this man the cleanness that he wants, would it make sense then for Jesus to completely avoid him?
Well, no, because he's going to save the sinners and the righteous, and
The ones that are sick.
That's right. I mean, you think about this even in relation to a doctor now. If you were a doctor who had discovered, the cure for Lou Gehrig's disease, would you spend the rest of your professional career avoiding everybody who has Lou Gehrig's disease? Wouldn't you do the opposite? Wouldn't you be seeking those people out? Wouldn't you be going where you know they are and finding their support groups and getting lists of names so you could say, you know what, I got the cure that you need? It doesn't make sense for Jesus to keep his distance from the leper because he's the cure for what the leper has. In the same way, it doesn't make sense for Jesus to keep his distance from the sinners for the same reason, because he's the cure for what they have. He has the answer not just to the ritual impurity, but to the spiritual impurity. And the reason that the Pharisees and the scribes are criticizing him is because they don't know who he is. They're looking at him and expecting him to fit into the categories of their own teachers, of the like he's just another religious leader. But that's not who he is. If he has the kind of authority that only God has, he's exactly where he should be. When he says he's come to call not the righteous but the sinners, I don't think he's implying that the Pharisees and the scribes are righteous and don't need a savior. I think his response is a tongue-in-cheek challenge to their assumption about who he is, that he is not just another religious leader who needs to maintain his ritual purity. If Isaiah 61 is his job description, then he's right where he should be because he's sitting in the middle of the very people who need him the most. He's not just come to teach people about righteousness. You can do that at a distance. He's come to become their righteousness. He's come to actually save them from their sins. And he can't do that if he keeps his distance. It's fellowship with Jesus that frees people from their bondage. Okay, now we've been talking about this, but just think back now about the bigger picture. About this in relation to the two preceding episodes. There's a logical progression in these events. That we started with physical healing, ritual healing, then to physical plus spiritual healing, and now we're at spiritual healing. Because through these events, it's becoming clear that Jesus has not just the power to heal people outside, but the power to heal their inside too. And in fact, the physical miracles, are intended to demonstrate that he has the power to forgive their sins. So, you see with the leper that Jesus is uncontaminatable when it comes to ritual purity. Then you get to that episode with the paralytic where Jesus forgives the man's sin and heals his paralysis. That bridges the gap now to the last bit where we see here, where Jesus is calling all the spiritually unclean and offering them righteousness through who he is. Through fellowship with him, he's offering them a purity that nobody else can accomplish. And all of that, the rules, all of this makes logical sense, I think, if you remember how Leviticus presented ritual purity as a metaphor for sin. The rules surrounding ritual contamination in the Old Testament were not primarily for the sake of health and hygiene. They were primarily a teaching tool to illustrate the spiritual contamination of sin. So it would make sense that once Jesus demonstrates the authority that he has to remove ritual impurity, he would graduate to removing the spiritual impurity, which has always been the real issue. The whole point of the book of Leviticus was to set the stage for this. So that when Jesus shows up on the scene and does what he does, all those people who know the law stop and say, hang on a minute. This is not just a new and better Moses. This is not a new and better Elijah or Elisha or Joshua. This guy is in a category all his own because he's breaking the categories of the Levitical law. Jesus is the one who established the Levitical law in order to show up and break them in a way that everybody would say, who is he? He can't just be another guy. He has to be God in the flesh. So when the religious leaders respond the way they do, it's because they don't understand the depth of their own sinfulness, and they also don't understand who Jesus is. If he has the authority to forgive sins, of course he's going to keep company with sinners, because one touch from Jesus is all it takes to make someone fit for the presence of God. And he's the only one who can do that, who can cleanse people not just on the outside, but on the inside. And by the way, this whole topic is going to continue next week. We just stopped kind of right in the middle of this whole back and forth with Jesus and the religious leaders, but we're going to carry on with this next week. Okay, why do these things matter for us? How's it relevant to us?
One of the things that impressed me a lot about the friends bringing their friend down to see Jesus was that it was his friend's faith and not his faith.
And I don't think that implies he doesn't have faith.
No.
But who has to have the faith to get him there when he can't get him there himself?
Right.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, you're
It
seeing
is
the
a
faith
lot
of
of
the whole group.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the man on the mat didn't glorify God when he said your sins are forgiven you. They glorified God when he was healed.
I wonder if the guy on the mat was laying there thinking, what? And then you think he must be reflecting on that when he goes home. Thinking about what just happened right there. And what did he say? You know?
Why was it so important about my sin and not?
Or maybe he's a guy who actually is very aware of his sin, didn't come for that, but gets it, and maybe he walks away thinking, wow, freedom, like real freedom. Not just physical freedom, but spiritual freedom too.
Well, maybe it was the faith of the friends, and they convinced him to be let down into sin. And maybe he had the faith too, but
Yeah.
the friends definitely did.
That's right. I mean, faith on his part doesn't get him very far.
Yeah.
True.
But he probably had agreed to be a part of this
I think so
adventure.
too. I don't think they were bringing him on his mat against his will.
No.
But they could have.
They could have. They could have been like, you're going whether you like it.
Now, as somebody who knows the person,
Yeah.
if somebody offered, they'd go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
I think speaking particularly of the church, individual church, whether they're churches that hold themselves out to be full of faith, or whether they're churches full of sinners, who do we welcome, and how do we look at the people who come to visit us? There's an unfortunate number that are not welcome to people who are obvious enemies, but they're just full of faith.
As we study this, I realized the Jews, they didn't worship God three in one. So it took a lot of faith for them to see God in Jesus.
Yep.
A lot of faith. And a lot of thinking.
Yeah, it's going to take time for them to get their head around what's happening in Jesus.
Depending on what teaching they heard or what peace they saw outside of everything else.
you want to mention?